This can take up too much time. But we're not done, and you'll see that today will also be an important part of the same thing, except that today I want to teach about Amalek.
Oh.
And in fact, the class is titled Amalek and Me.
And me? In me?
And me.
And
You can say Amalek and Me if you want, but I thought that was going too far.
You said it was going too far?
Yeah, it was going too far.
Two changes on it. See if you can find it.
Shoshana Schmidt's name is spelled correctly.
That sounds like Friends. You like that? You're asking me about that?
So you turn the invites into a capital.
The computer did that.
Okay.
Because it's a new line.
Right.
Why?
If you need a second.
What about
There are two people coming back.
I think it's like for grammatical purposes, Amalek and me or Amalek and I. Like, what would be?
I don't know. People say
No, I'm saying how would that work?
I'm playing off of idioms, so
Right.
I don't know what. I think correctly you say Amalek and myself,
Right,
or
so to make a point, it's
but
Amalek and me,
but
right?
it's like a lot of movies are called something like
Yes.
My Dragon and Me. I don't know.
Me and Amalek.
Wow, that's already like.
Yeah, we're gonna put him first, and then it
He's our honored guest today. So it's about Amalek and me.
Me and my Amalek.
And
That's the name of our class today?
yep,
serious?
yeah. I don't know if I'm serious. But that leaves to be still to be determined.
Don't commit.
Okay. So it's Purim 2 weeks, right? Something like that. And from the time that Adar starts, so it's a good time. I'm going to start with the stories. It's a good time to start thinking about klipos. Like that's the theme, right? So like 2 weeks ago, like in the middle of the night, 12 midnight, I get a call from a very important and well-known Chabad rabbi. He's asking me these questions. He asks me, why is it if a klipa is just forbidden, so why are there three? Right? Because if it's forbidden, right? So what's the idea behind having three? The moment it's forbidden, gamal, it's done. Why would you have three? So the reason I'm laughing is because, wow, you really got to be outside of the world not to know how to indulge in klipa. So you don't know that there's levels of klipa. You don't know that there's like, this is wrong in this way, and that one's a lot more wrong in that way, and there's levels. Every person understands that in the klipa there's a lot of levels. They invest in themselves. They're not like these flat. Most of the world is a big klipa that's investing in itself all the time and all the different things that are forbidden. So it just showed me that that's why he's a Chabad rabbi and I'm not, because I know this and he doesn't, right? Because he's never heard about this. Well, not at the same level.
Do they have names?
And they have beautiful names. They have names, and I can't repeat them because they're klipas.
You're not supposed to say the name?
In Chezkel, it's easy. It's right. There it's easy. But so I told him, look, if you really want to read up on this stuff, so open up Mishnat Chasidim from Immanuel Chayriki. He was the greatest Kabbalist of his time. We're talking about a little bit before the Baal Shem Tov, maybe like 30 years before the Baal Shem Tov was born. He was also a tremendous Talmudist, and he was one of the greatest rabbis in Europe at the time. Immanuel Chayriki. And his most famous work really is Mishnat Chasidim, and that was his compilation of the Arizal's teachings. But unlike other compilations, especially the Arizal's himself or of Chaim Vital's, he has a third part which is dedicated to the worlds of the Klipa. And it's great reading. So the people really want to read this. Mishnat Chasidim. And so, for instance, one of the most interesting things that he does, it's not from him; it's an old thing. But he was Italian, and he knew the Christian system very well. So he corresponded the three main theological schools of Christianity to the three klipos.
Wow.
They're Beirut, Paris, and I don't remember the third one. But those were, I used to know something about medieval history, but those were the first universities. Yes, of course.
The Christian universities, right?
Theological schools. It's not just all the universities in the world started as theological schools. I mean, the old ones. Eventually, in the 17th century, you start getting universities that are founded just on Wissenschaft or Gesellschaft or whatever it is, on other things. But originally, most of the universities are founded on theology. That's the first thing that they teach. That's in Oxford and Cambridge are all theological schools to begin with. Yeah, that's why they call it Trinity College, and they call it whatever other college, and these are there. Harvard also, by the way, was started as a theological school. Yale, I'm not sure. Princeton was definitely a theological school to begin with. So there's a lot to read about klipos. They're about these impurities in the world, and they have names, and they have a lot of literature in Kabbalah, especially, is full of them and discusses them. A modern day analysis. Then I told him that the Rav had done a lot of modern day analysis on them, or correspondences, trying to understand how they function today. And basically his picture in modern, especially modern Israel, but I think it's around the world, is that the three klipas are the media. It sounds very right, ominous. Mm-hmm. Media, the judicial system, and the executive branch.
Especially in our country.
Especially here. Not because they're bad people, but because the spirit, again, the idea of a klipa is not necessarily that the person himself is a negative person. It's just that he's buying into ideas, into a frame of mind that is ruining his ability to serve Hashem. And the idea that here what he was doing was building hierarchy, like that there is something that's fueling everything from behind. That's like the media. I don't want to get into this so much because these are really more political issues and other things that I try not to get involved with. But it's certainly it's a big issue, and that there's a hierarchy behind them. And okay, so our interest is in the klipas as far as the psyche goes, and what are the three main, call them maladies of the ego here. Some of this will sound familiar, some of it won't. It's from a different perspective. It's like I'm looking at it from a diagnostic perspective now. So we're going to look at the three main maladies of the ego, the three main problems, and the feeling of the I, and how I see myself. And it turns out that Amalek is just one of them. There's others as well. Now in Chassidus, usually the order is that you have to find something in holiness, then you can start looking at it in the opposite of holiness. Because you have to start with goodness. You can't start just putting, all the negative things in front of you and hoping that somehow you'll emerge from the darkness and figure out how to deal with this. You have to first think about it in holiness. Except for one time of year, which is Purim. And Purim has a special power, this victory over Haman, over Amalek. It gives us a special power to be able to go directly to look at the evil inside, if you want, or the evil outside, wherever it is, to deal with the klipos. And therefore, one interesting thing is, I don't know if you'll be coming or not, but Te'amlek li. There's a phrase now in Hebrew. Somebody wrote on the Facebook, Te'amlek. Te'amlek is a very strange acronym that also exists in English. I don't remember how they say it in English, but in Hebrew, it means Aroch midai lo karati. It's too long, I haven't read. So Te'amlek li means, write me a synopsis. Like you read something, right? Somebody put a long Facebook post. It's just too long, I don't have time to read the whole thing. So somebody writes Te'amlek li, meaning, I don't want, right, it's not an ayin, it's an aleph, but it sounds the same. So somebody wrote here, Amalek li, et kol hashiyur. Like, give me the short version of the whole shiur. Okay. Anyway, so it's connected to Amalek. I don't know if you plan on coming, but usually when the Rav teaches on Purim evening in Ramat Aviv at his son's yeshiva, so he'll deal with the klipas. That's almost, no, it's all in Hebrew. But that's usually the topic, one way or another. He'll deal with the things that usually during the rest of the year he's not willing to deal with. And it makes for, again, if you're interested in these topics, like this Chabad rabbi was obviously becoming interested, but had no idea where to even read up on it. So it's a really good shiur. Okay, so basically what we're going to do is we're going to repeat a shiur that was almost 10 years ago on this topic, and we're going to look at the three klipas from the perspective of the ego, of what the problem is. So the thing to note about Amalek in Chabad, in the Alter Rebbe's writings, is that he never mentions the connection between Amalek and doubt, which is a famous thing from the Baal Shem Tov, that Amalek equals doubt. And I don't know if you remember this.
I do.
But we've talked a lot about doubt, and that it's not necessarily a negative thing, right? First of all, a person should doubt himself, maybe, right? Obviously, they didn't mean doubt in the sense of doubting oneself. The Baal Shem Tov meant doubt in the sense of doubting Hashem, doubting the Torah, doubting faith. But what does the Alter Rebbe talk about? He talks about Amalek being a sense of tiferet, of pe'er, of being beautifying himself. He's what do you call the thing with the thing with the plumage, the whole the peacock. He's like a peacock. And it's an interesting observation. How did you get to that? Where did you get that idea?
She's good visually.
How did you come to that? So it's not by chance that Purim is always during the time of year that we read the parshas that are connected to the Mishkan. Right? In the Mishkan there's like a secret here. We'll talk about two levels of it. There's a secret of how the Mishkan is a remedy to Amalek's attempt to beautify himself. Okay? In fact, about anything that has to do with the Mishkan, we always say Ze keli v'anaveu, that it's a mitzvah to make Hashem's house more beautiful. But it's not only that, as we'll see, the other topic is not just the house and the vessels, but maybe in some ways more importantly, depending on how you look at things, right? There's people who look at things that the building is more important. There's other people who say, it's not the building that's important, it's who goes into the building. And I'm not talking about Hashem here. Rather, who am I talking about? I'm talking about Aaron, the priest. So there's a mitzvah to make the Kohen beautiful. And he's probably the most ostentatiously beautiful figure in all of the Tanakh, right? With all his beautiful garments. And we've talked about it many times that Aaron is like the woman of the house. And he's the one who does the cooking and cleaning and the putting the bread on and baking the bread, and making it and eating it. So he's like, and he's also dressed in a feminine way, and he has jewelry. So he doesn't wear rings on his fingers, and he doesn't have what do you call it on his earrings, but he has jewelry. He wears a big medallion, so he would not put to shame any gangster in East LA. Right? And he's got the gold tiara on front of his. And not only that, he's very ostentatious, very bold, because you hear these bells everywhere he goes. He's like a presence, and it's an idea that he's supposed to be beautiful. Not only that, the laws of his getting haircuts, for instance, right? That he has to get a haircut once a month. At minimum, you can get more, but at minimum it has to be at least once a month. Can't have any hair out of place, right? So that's like the. So this idea of beauty can play off of the Mishkan, but we'll get to that a bit later. But just to understand that it's always living with the times means that there's a message in the parshas themselves that have to do with the holidays that are involved, even though again. It's not so, of course, because the original order of reading was to finish the Torah once every 3 years in Eretz Yisrael. So we adopted the minhag in Bavel, which was once every year. And then we have this whole cycle that we complete the reading of the Torah every year. By the way, this whole question of how they did it, but apparently, even when they did it in a cycle of 3 years, so each year they would read a third of each parsha. So they would still be in the same order. Yes, not a parsha in 3 weeks, but every week a third of the parsha.
Why would they do that?
I have no idea what their reason is, but I can tell you why I prefer it. Because to learn a whole parsha every week is just too difficult, and so you just can't get through everything.
Especially the stories of Bereshit. Chop it up like that.
So it's not such a big deal. I mean, the parshas already. It's not like, it's not kindergarten where they have to tell you the story. You know the story, and you want to focus on something that you can handle. To learn that much every week, every year. So it turns out in the end that I learn much less because I'm trying to somehow finich all of Torah or in the parsha every week, and it's very difficult. So I don't get to other books and so on, and it becomes a problem. If it was up to me, we'd go back to that system, because I think it's my what? Yeah. If I only knew what their address was.
Thanks for that, Mary.
Okay, so Amalek is about this. Is trying to beautify himself. That's how the Alter Rebbe explains him. Now, to fully understand, we have to see him in context, because apart from Amalek, even though he's Rishit Goyim Amalek, he's the head of all. He's the beginning. He's the source of all the nations. There's also 2 other nations at least that you have to take into account when talking about the Klippa, and these 2 nations. Especially when we talk about the problems in the ego, they represent these very deep problems, and we're familiar with some of them. For instance, Paro is famous for saying, Ani Oriv Ani Asitini, I am my Nile, and I made myself. So his problem with his ego is, right, his ego is Melo kol ha'olam kvodo, right, his ego fills the entire world. He's everywhere. Really, there's nothing except for him. That's his feeling. But the other klipa that's very famous, and you could say that this is really the one that Moshe Rabbeinu battles against, and it's not Amalek, even though Moshe Rabbeinu is right on top of the mountain and he's holding his hands up to give them faith to fight. Really, this is Yoshua's battle. It's not Moshe Rabbeinu's battle.
Yeah.
And that's Midian. The one that Moshe Rabbeinu ends his life with, Hashem tells him, Nekom nikmat Hashem me'eta Midyanim v'acharta asef el amecha, that you should take vengeance on the Midianites for what they did, that they caused so many Jews to die at Baal Peor, with Bilam that gave them the idea of sending their women to seduce the men. So after you take vengeance and you fight a war against them, then you will depart the world and return to your forefathers. So for Moshe Rabbeinu, that's the penultimate battle, the most important one that he has, and in that sense, Midian is the chokhmah of the klipa. It's like Moshe Rabbeinu is chokhmah, he's bittul, and Midian is the anti-bittul. It's the anti-self-nullification. But in a sense, you could say that everything with the ego has a problem of self-nullification, whether it nullifies or not. So you have to be more exact in exactly what each one is a problem with.
Did you say Paro was?
Paro I didn't say yet, but we'll say right now that Paro is already his statement, Ani Oriv Ani Asitini, or it shows up twice more in Tanakh, a little bit different. It says, Ani v'afsi od, I and no one but me. So really his problem is not in Chokhmah, and in Chabad he's placed in Mitzrayim is placed in Bina in this sense. And they go together with two other nations that have the same issue, which is Bavel and Assyria. About both of whom, about Bavel, Yeshaya in chapter 47 says Ani v'afsiod, that they say Ani v'afsiod, I and no one but me. And Tzfania, in chapter 2 of Tzfania, he discusses Nineveh, which is Assyria, Ashur. And he says about them that they also say Ani v'afsiod. It was kind of, I started out with something that reminded me, right, because I talked about the media being a type of klipa, and right away, I mean, you can't run away from what's going on in the world. You right away hear Trump's rhetoric. And it's famous that the Lubavitcher Rebbe always identified the United States with Assyria. Ashur, yeah. That's a famous thing. Why? He identified it in a different sense. He said, because of the wealth, because that everything is big. Ashur is, Osher, is that everything is about enjoyment. Everything is about having fun, a good time, or whatever it is. It works in both ways. You know, it can be a valuable thing if you're in that golus, especially since he said that that the United States is a malchus of chesed. It's a nation that in the end doesn't just indulge in its wealth, but it would like to share it with everybody, whether they like it or not. But there is this thing about sharing it and wanting the level in the rest of the world to rise, which is what empires act like. They say, we have to export our way of life. So we'll see. So really, as we'll see, this is not what Trump's rhetoric is really like. He's not just "I'm everything." We'll see in a moment what he's like. But I'm falling into policy. I didn't want to do that, but anyway, I guess it's
Media,
it's too much media. Yeah.
Right. What are you going to do?
Too much media. Okay. So let's try to understand each one separately. Midian, the famous mimer from the Rebbe Rashab, from the fifth Rebbe, called Hechaltu, and it's one of the first mimarim that a yeshiva bacher learns in Chabad.
It's the first mimer the Rebbe gave out.
And the first mimer the Rebbe gave out as a Rebbe, and that mimer explains the klipa of Midian, and it explains it's madonu meriva. The Midian means madon. What's madon? Madon means that I can't stand you not because you've done anything to me. It's just because you take up space, my space.
Madon, what does Madon mean?
It means a type of argument or inability to get along with others, not because they've done anything to me, but rather just because they're in my space. They're in my face.
Different than baseless hatred?
It is a baseless hatred. Okay? But the baselessness here does have a reason, but the reason has nothing to do with what the person did or didn't do. It has nothing to do with actions. It has to do with their existence, their very existence. Meaning, you are in my face. It bothers me. I can't stand somebody who suffers from. Skipping the word. Fear of going out into places with a lot of people. What's it called?
that phobia.
Agoraphobia. Okay, thank you. So somebody who suffers from agoraphobia, in a certain sense, might be suffering from this. Okay? This might be the core of what's going on. To say it another way, when you analyze this type of blemish in the ego, it's that the ego feels that it has to occupy all the space. Okay? That I can't allow anybody else into my space. Privacy, a problem with privacy would come from this, right? My private space. Don't infringe on my space. There's something I learned as I grew older, and I was very surprised because I didn't think the world worked that way. But at least in Israel, a lot of things work on the basis of who was here first. Okay? I'm not talking about with the Arabs at all. I'm talking about between Jews. A lot of arguments between people.
Like in the bank,
That too, but I'm talking about mamash, like who gets to decide in this shul how we're going to daven or what we're going to do with it. I was here first. Okay, this is my space. That's Midian, because really you're saying I don't need to hear anything else because I already occupied the space. It's mine, and so there's no room for anybody else. So this blemish is very common. It's much more common than we think. And again, to think about people fighting for space at home, or
to some degree.
Okay. I mean, this is very common. This is a klipa, and everybody has it to some degree. Kids definitely have it, right? That this is my space. She's in my space. The whole argument that ensues every Shabbos day, unless you have, so you make permanent spaces, but then it always shifts because there's guests and there's this and that. So
is it important to break that then, or like?
It's a klipa. We have to think about how to do it with children is different than how to do it with an adult who's suffering from it. But the main thing is to be aware that this is a separate type of ego blemish. It's not the same thing as the other ones.
Giving it to a child, can that damage then? I mean, so mixed up, but they're like, are you helping them in the future, or can you cause damage? Like, in our house, I don't necessarily give anybody. They don't really have their own bed. They move around. And I do it on. I don't mind it. I do it on purpose.
I think it's a good thing.
Okay,
but you have to have enough kids for it to work. If you don't have enough children, that doesn't work. So
there aren't enough beds sometimes.
So that's even better.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stories about, somebody just told me, there's a lot of stories about Hasidim who suddenly ended up on somebody's bed. In Dunin's home, that was a very famous thing. That most of the nights he didn't sleep in his bed because there was always, some guest or whatever. Oh. That ability to say, I don't have my own space is very rectified already. There we're talking about not just that there's no klipa, but that the person has really transformed it into something very positive. And it means, as we'll see, that you have to fix any one of these, you have to identify with how Hashem feels. Does Hashem have a space in the world? That's basically the question. Okay. Their house was like that, I think. It was very dynamic.
Very open.
Right, open space and very...
just not attached to spaces. They could give up their bedroom, sleep in the hallway. They just were not...
Right. So there's a lot of people who say that if you take that away from children when they're growing up, they have no sense of security and so on. It could be. I don't know. It's very particular. You have to look at the children. You have to look at the parents. You have to see exactly what fits. But if the parents give an example in that sense, it could be that the children will get it the right way. It could be. But not necessarily. Like when I look at, I can't help but always look at my Rebbes, and they have very set rooms, and in fact, there's a lot of privacy in many of them. That certainly the Gemara says you have to have a room, a house within a house, right? That there has to be a private space where the parents is not, which is off limits, right? That kids can't get into. That has to exist. But the issue here is not so much whether I have a space as much as when I'm here, is this mine? Can this now become mine? In the sense that if I get up, for instance, you go to a shiur and it's very packed, like here, for instance, right? If these two guys get up, and somebody comes and sits in their place, so will they get angry? If you get angry, if you get upset at that, this is my place, so you can try to, deal with it in some way, but if you're getting angry, that's the blita, that's the protrusion in you, that you have this blemish. The space has to be yours somehow. Okay, so that's really midyan. Again, you're in my face. It's not even that you did anything. You don't have to do anything at all. It's just that you're here occupying my space. So if you want to say it in one word, it's the feeling of the ego is, I am here. I'm here. That's the I. Okay, with Mitzrayim, Assyria, and Babylon, we said that their problem is Ani v'afsiod, I'm the only thing that's here. So they're a different issue altogether. They're not telling you you've taken my space, or they completely ignore you. You don't exist. As far as they're concerned, you don't exist. You can be anywhere you want. It doesn't matter. And if you, for instance, if somebody has this blemish, so somebody will sit in their spot and just sit on him, or maybe pull the chair out. You don't exist. It's not. You don't bother me because you're in my face, because I don't see you. Like you're not there. That's a feeling of I am everything. I really am everything.
So this is worse, or not? You made that other one sound like it's rectifiable.
In a certain sense, yes.
Rectifiable?
Yes, it's also rectifiable. They're all rectifiable. I'm trying to think of the examples. This is usually what we talk about when we talk about an egotistical person. He has no regard for anybody else. It's not that anybody else really bothers him even. He doesn't even see them. We say in Hebrew. It could be a narcissist. It could be a worse problem. Egomaniac. It doesn't necessarily have to be that it's because I like. It could be because my ego is so big that there's just no room for anybody else. There's simply no room. The world can't contain more than one big ego. Okay? So if we had to say this in Hebrew, we'd say Ani Akol. I'm everything. That's how they feel. But interestingly, these are not the worst is Amalek. And Amalek, so we'll say no, he's saying like I'm beautiful, but really if you want to generalize this, it's the feeling that I am greater. I'm more than you. So, the first thing to note about this is that Amalek doesn't ignore other people's existence or other nations' existence. On the contrary, he's very sensitive to it. It's just that he's very competitive. That if you become anything important, I have to outdo you. Okay. So here's really where Let's Make America Great Again comes in. because right away you feel, because it's not about, it's not even about that nobody else exists. I have to be better than, right? I have to be more than everybody else, which can be a positive thing, as we'll see, because all these things can be fixed. But if it's in the klipa, it's mamash that any time anybody has any amount of success, I have to outdo them. I can't leave them that way. You might say that that's how, that's the overriding feeling that people who are in competition in some way, whether businessmen or politicians or sportsmen, how do you say a sport team? Like athletes, thank you. That they have, right? If somebody else, as long as you're a nobody, I don't care. But the moment you become somebody, I have to outdo you. I'm very competitive. So that's really Amalek. And because of this, we put Amalek in Dat. He's not Chochma and Bina. So Midian is the klipa of Chochma, and Mitzrayim and I'm everything is a klipa of Bina. If you feel something about Bina, so the first thing you know about Bina maybe is that it's the beginning of existence, beginning of there being something, of being. So he's everything. I am everything there is, and there has to be something. In Chochma, it's almost like there's just space. There's nothing occupying it yet, so it's just about the space. But in Bina, there's already something, and I'm all that something. In that, there's a lot more. There's a whole world, and you're very aware of it. And as it says about Amalek, Yodeh et kono mitkaven limod bo, that he recognizes God, and he, on purpose, rebels against him. He purposefully does this, meaning that he's a very sensitive guy. He's not stuck in himself, put it that way. And he sees around him. So so this is very interesting, meaning that the Alter Rebbe here is identifying Amalek with competitiveness, with being over-competitive. And it can be with other people, as we see what did Amalek do? The moment that, as long as the Jewish people were, right, they always hated this, because he's a grandson of Esav. And Beyadua Shalacha Esav Sonel Yaakov, that it's a halacha. It's almost like he can't go against halacha. He's a from Yid, Esav, so he can't break the halacha that Esav hates Yaakov, and so does his grandson. Amalek is Esav's grandson. But as long as the Jewish people were in Egypt, out of the picture, so everything's fine. The moment they have any kind of success, he has to come out and show that he's better. And he has to show. How do you show that you're better? So, like always, the easiest approach is to tackle the weak point in the other person, right? That's exactly what they did. That he attacked those who were staggering behind, right? That they couldn't keep up in faith and in trust in God, whatever it is. That's where Amalek hits you as hard as it can, to show you that really he's better than you are. And that's how all competitiveness works in us, I think, that we look for the weak point in somebody else and take advantage of it and show that actually we're better. We don't want to compete with them in the things that they're good. We'd rather compete with them in the things that they're not so good at, where we feel that we have a chance. Right? So if we had to say Amalek in one word, we'd say, in a simple phrase, it's Ani Gadol, that I'm great. So, again, Midian says, I'm here. And Mitzrayim says, I'm everything. And Amalek says, I'm great. Now, the Rav gave a beautiful gematria that if you add these three phrases together, Ani po, Ani akol, Ani gadol, it equals to 6 times Ani. 6 times ani means that it's all the permutations of the I, of ani. So it's ani, alf, nun, yud, alf, yud, nun yud, alf, nun, alf, yud, and then yud, nun, alf, and yud, alf, nun.
Hakol or ani kol?
Ani hakol, hakol. So it's like, this takes into account all the possible problems in the ego. Okay? It's like saying these are the 3 categories, these are the 3 main categories that people have issues with. Okay? Again, it's like how the I affects all the midot. That's another way of thinking of it. Okay. So how do you remedy these things? How do you do something about this? And again, I really feel that this is a very good, starting point for diagnostics, trying to figure out where's the person, what is he really dealing with, and we'll see now that thankfully there's a remedy for each one of these, and administering the remedy is not as easy as writing a prescription for some drug, but it's certainly what the topic of discussion should be and where the therapy should go, in which direction. So to do a lot of Tanya in a few words. So the Tanya in chapter 3, the beginning of chapter 3, explains what Chokhmah, Bina, and Dad are. Chapter 3 is a very interesting chapter. We dealt with the second part of it yesterday, which he repeats again at the end of Igeret HaKodesh Tet Vav, in the 15th epistle. There he talks about that, but I want to talk about Bina. So the first part of chapter 3 explains what Bina is, and he says that Bina is litbunin. It's again, this word that's been hijacked by the East. It's called meditate, which we always say, if you want to know what meditations are, you read Pascal's Meditations, and then you understand what a meditation is. Meditation is to think deeply about something, not to empty your mind and lead to nothingness in yourself and in the world. So he writes that the meditation in general has 3 topics. There are 3 objects of meditation, of course, all about Hashem, and they go from below to above. To meditate upon Hashem being memale kol almin, filling all worlds. To meditate upon Hashem as being sovev kol almin, meaning encircling or encompassing all the worlds. And finally, to meditate upon Hashem as being kula kamei kelo chashiv, that everything before Him is as naught. It's like it doesn't, as nothingness. And he purposefully puts this in this order because this is an order from below to above. Meaning you start out looking at what you can grasp the best, which is how God fills all worlds, and I'll explain this in a second. Then you move on to something that's more difficult to grasp, and maybe even not entirely graspable, but sensible in some ways, we call it in a makif sense, we can get a certain handle on it. That's the sovev kol almin, that Hashem is encompassing all worlds. And finally, to the thing that is most difficult to grasp in our mind, which is that everything before Him, it's like looking from God's perspective from above to below and seeing that everything before Him is, first of all, nothing, and then He creates it. Okay? But first of all, it's nothing from His perspective until He creates it. Memale kol almin, to meditate upon memale kol almin, and again, we have to understand these 3 terms, and one more in a second, or in a few minutes, in order to see the remedies for these ego conditions. So to meditate upon memale kol almin, to meditate upon Hashem filling all worlds, that's basically what the Rambam writes, that what is the way to love and fear God? By meditating on His actions. on Masav. What does he do? So what did he do? He created the earth, he created the plants, he created the animals, he created, if you know physics, the physical laws, and he created everything that we can, that a mind can grasp, that we can understand. That's meditating upon filling all worlds. And because it's graspable, it's likened to how the soul fills the body, which is a very palpable thing for me. Meaning, I can feel, what does it mean, soul? Soul means my life. I can feel the life in my arms. I can feel the life in my torso. I can feel the life in my head. I feel the life there. I could also imagine maybe what it would be like to be lifeless. But it's a graspable thing. It's something that my mind can certainly wrap itself around. And I feel this. It's a sensible experience. So we say that Hashem fills the world the same way that the neshama fills the body. In other words, it would not be meditating upon Amalek and Me if I would try to think about, I don't know, Maxwell's laws of electromagnetics if I don't understand vector calculus. It doesn't make any sense. I can't wrap my head around this. So that's not Amalek and Me. It has to be something that I understand at my level. Whatever my level is, even a child, I can explain this to him. What does it mean that Hashem is Amalek and Me? The same way that you move your finger, you feel that it's moving, etc. That's the same thing. It's the life in the world. That's Amalek and Me. What is Sovev Kol Anmin? Sovev Kol Anmin is more difficult, but it's saying that if I have life in me, and it's not running away, it's not escaping, it's not departing me, somehow it's still contained in the body, but I know that it could depart. So something's keeping it intact. To say it another way, something is keeping the laws of physics permanent. Something is ensuring that I have a sense of self that's continuous from moment to moment. Certainly myself is a type of Memalek Ol Almin. I can understand that that's part of Hashem as Memalek Ol Almin. But what is ensuring that from moment to moment I don't lose my mind? If I do, by the way, so that's not a very good topic of meditation. Don't meditate on it. You got to take something that you do feel is here and is being held. Now, you can't know Hashem as surrounding our worlds directly. It's an indirect knowledge. It's sort of like an extrapolation from what you do have. And it's called mevin davar mitoch davar. It's to understand something from something else. So I understand that since I'm consistent in some way, the laws of nature are consistent in some way, the sun is consistent, everything here is consistent, something is holding the breath of life or the flow, or call it the beat of the world, making it continue to beat. So, by the way, we call this, or the sages call this chai v'kayam. Right? David Melech Yisrael chai v'kayam. What do you want to say? On the one hand, he's chai, that's the memaleh, and kayam, that it's sustainable. Today, how do you say sustainability in Hebrew? Kayamut. That's the word they chose. It means the same thing. It's like to sustain something, that it remains. So now you understand why we call it encircling. We call it encircling because in a certain sense it's the shell, it's the enclosure that's keeping things in place, that's keeping life from seeping out, from escaping out. And in everything it's that way. Meaning the fact that this cup doesn't suddenly turn into an elephant is because something's holding its form.
And you're saying that's so big?
Mm-hmm. Therefore it's in everything.
So, because usually Mamale is like immanent and Sovev is transcendent.
Transcendent,
So
right.
it seems a little different than it doesn't seem like you're not exactly.
Transcendent is the aspect of Hashem that I can't encounter directly. That's really what I mean. So Hashem's transcendency is an aspect of the Sovev. It's true that when I want to talk about, call it theology, okay, in theological terms, the Sovev would become Hashem's being transcendent. In ontological terms, in terms of what there is, right? So Hashem's Sovev would be exactly this thing that we're describing. That somehow it's what's keeping things in place. It's the form being held together by something. I don't know exactly what. They used to give an idea of how difficult it is to really experience the Sovev if you try to tackle it logically. So it goes back to the question of, is the universe finite or infinite? So that's why we say that the Sovev is infinite. We don't say that it's finite. And why is this an example? Because people say, what is it easier for you to imagine, that the universe is finite or infinite? So most people say it's easier to imagine that it's finite. So then say, okay, if it's finite, what's on the outside? And then you get suddenly to the idea that whatever's holding the universe has got to be infinite. There's no end to it, because if there was an end to it, so what's on the other side? And so in a certain sense, that's why the Sovev is always defined as being infinite. So it's a tricky way to get to it, but you get the idea. And why do we call it Sovev? Because the circle is infinite. The idea of a circle having no beginning and no end. It's not really infinite, because you can draw a circle. But if you try to follow it, and you're an ant on the circle, you'll keep going forever. Right? But the Mamale is a line, which has a beginning and an end. A very clear beginning, very clear end. So these are the two levels, the first two levels of meditating on Hashem. Now, when it comes to the third level, there's actually two possibilities. We mentioned one, the one that appears in chapter 3 of the Tanya, and then he repeats it even a few more times, which is Kula Kamei Kolo Chashiv. That after you understand that Hashem is sustaining the world, He's not just giving it life, He's also sustaining it. So then you understand that if He's sustaining it, so there must have been something before the world. And that means that since He created it, everything for Him is, like Bill Cosby would say, I'm not afraid of, he used to say this in his skit about his children. I tell my kids, if you don't behave, I'll kill you. I'll make another one just like you. Okay? So if Hashem can make another one, He doesn't like. So what is this? If you're the creator, that's how it is. Okay? He's not limited in that way. So that's like saying that Kula Kamei Kula Chashiv. Really, does He really not care? Of course He cares. But He can make another one. So if you can make another one, just like it, a little bit different, whatever, with you in it, without you in it, whatever it is. So there's a certain sense of Kula Kamei Kula Chashiv. Everything before Him is as if it's not. It's not really existence, but really we're getting at something much more than that. It's not a moral statement about Hashem that He can make another one. It's saying that from Hashem's perspective, nothing has its own existence, right? Kula Kamei Kolo Chashiv means that everything before Him is as if it's not. Not that it doesn't exist, but that its inability to exist by itself. Meaning He has to give it its existence. Therefore it actually proves the opposite, that He considers it to be worthwhile to make it exist. And it's not to give you a sense of being without value. On the contrary, since you have no existence of your own, and Hashem has to bring you into existence, you're very valuable.
It's very interesting on the other side, too.
What's the other side?
Thinking of law of relativity and all, that in order to be, you have to be seen, you have to be observed. So if we are not observing God,
so He has to observe me for me to exist. It's one of, but it's even more than just observing. It's to make me. Okay? I was going to say something more about this. But let's leave it at that for the moment. Maybe I'll think of the other thing. This phrase "Kula kamei kelo chashiv" is a phrase from the book of Daniel. Yeah, we've discussed this, I think, a few times. That really, in the original, it doesn't say "kelo" with kaf lamed aleph. It's not saying it's as nothing. Kelo chashiv. It's as if, and by the way, chashiv means doesn't count for anything. It's not countable. It actually says kaf lamed hey. That's the reading, and it was changed by the Zohar to read kaf lamed aleph. What does kaf lamed hey mean? So in the Gemara, Rashi explains that kaf lamed hey means like the dust that the sunbeams grind through a window. Right? When there's a sun coming in, you see dust like inside the sunbeam. This dust is like, it's a beautiful description, I think. It's like the sun is grinding the dust. So it's kula kamei kelachashiv means that everything before him counts like this dust. Very, very small particles. That's with a hey. But in the Zohar it turned into entirely nothing. Kelo, like it's nothing. Like it doesn't count at all. And again, the idea here is its existence. That since it only has existence because Hashem wills it to have existence, so therefore really it's like nothing.
It sounds a little bit too close to holding it together to me. I'm not seeing enough of a difference.
Holding it together means that even if this cup would stop being a cup, it would still exist. Okay? I'm just losing the definition in terms of...
What is it then? Paper?
Paper, I don't know. You can't lose its form, lose its... in the same way that when a person passes away, so he lost the form that he had. He can't continue to act as a person. But he still exists, the body still exists. Here we're talking about the actual matter. Nothing here would exist, neither the matter nor the form, none of them. They're all brought into existence by Hashem. So it's more than just keeping it together.
In the Zohar, you also place always with the layers. And kelo is also kel.
So that's a verse. I don't know what to do that right now. So.
You always can. Is that how you spell prison also?
Kele. No, but again, the way it's read is kelo chashim. Okay. But like I said, that this is how he repeats it many times in the Tanya. But in the Igeret HaKodesh at the beginning, the very beginning, he offers a different third level. And instead of saying everything before him is as nothing, he says Le tatar panui minei, that there's nothing void of him, there's nothing empty of him, which would be a different third level of meditation. And it's, you see the difference, right? Because the first one, kelo chashiv, means still talking about the world, and here suddenly you're transferring to talk only about Hashem. So really, the way to understand this is that this is a yud kei vav kei of meditation. And again, these are the basic things that a person has to meditate on, to think about during the day. Meaning to feel that Hashem is nothing less, if much more, than the life in me. And it's such a thing that goes untalked about. In today, everybody hopefully is talking about it already. But it's so hidden from so many people who see Hashem as some kind of, again, the God who only commands, and he also punishes, and maybe he also gives rewards once in a while. But this kindergarten teacher, and it's so different. If you can't start with Hashem there. That's like almost a leap that is too big for a person to take. The first meditation is always on what you can grasp fully. And so you have to start at some level with something like the life force in me. And those things that I understand. Could it be that I understand Torah and I understand that Hashem commanded me? That's very good. It's all good and well. But if I don't, I have to start with those things that I do understand, that I do grasp and comprehend. and have an experience of. Okay? And then I can progress to understand that that experience has to be held by something together. And then I have to continue on to either without him nothing here would exist at all, and without him it has no value, or to the level of that he fills everything. After I finished all that,
Still tells us nothing about Hashem.
that tells you everything. What do you mean?
We,
What are you
we know
lacking?
What Hashem is not, what does that tell us about Hashem? It tells us about our own experience.
Nachon, your relationship. Who are you relating to? Okay? He doesn't say you relate to Hashem as the giver of the Torah. Okay? You have to begin with Hashem as something you can relate to. This is what Bina does.
Don't we only really know what Hashem is not?
That's the Rambam.
Right.
Chassidus is a next level. 2 levels, actually. It says that the Rambam, this is an important introduction, and we don't have time to go through all of it, but there are 3 stages in the development of knowledge of God, and there's a famous mashal for it. That this king wanted to, sorry, not the king, start from the other side. That there was a city that wanted to get to know their king, who they had never seen. So I think probably related this at least once. So they sent a party of their wise men to go to his palace and to stay there for a while and come back and tell them who their king is and what is he about and what does he want and what is he doing. So they went, they stayed there for a few months and they came back. And over the course of a few days, they related everything they saw in his court and how he was and so on. And people were very happy. Finally, they knew who their king was. Sort of like what the media does today when you get they get to go into somebody's house and see him. But think about media that's only coming back and telling you the story, but they can't show you anything. At the second stage, they were very happy, but they said, we want to know more. What does he look like? What does his house look like? What does the palace look like? What does everything look like? So they sent a group of artists to go and paint what they saw. So they were there a few months, and they came back with a whole series of paintings, and everybody put it in the town hall, and everybody comes to see it. And now they know what their king looks like, and they see this is where he lives, and this is how his court is held, and this is and all the things they've heard all these stories about. Suddenly they have a picture of it. But that wore off after a while also, and they said, this is all good, but we still don't know. This is not him yet. So they sent their wisest person to find a solution. So he went to the palace, and after a few months, he was able to come back with the king. Okay. And he came back with the king, and now everybody saw him, and they spent time with him, they talked to him. Now they understood who they were subjects of. And it changed their whole understanding of their place in the world. So it says though there's three stages in the development of theology in Yiddishkeit, that philosophy, which is the height of which is the Rambam, he's the highest philosopher, is always a sense of just describing what there is, and you always fall short, because the mind cannot acquire the infinite. So the Rambam calls this, not just Rambam, Rasag, everybody calls this Omek HaMusag veKotzer HaMasig, the depth of the subject being addressed and the shortness of the mind addressing it, that I can't encompass the whole thing. So therefore I always feel that I've fallen short and I don't understand it completely. And that's how it is with the Rambam. That's how it is with Jewish philosophy. Then came Kabbalah. And Kabbalah is a series of pictures, really. It's paintings. It's all very, especially the Arizal. It's just one huge painting of what Hashem is like. So some of it is like geometric, that he uses a geometric figure to try to explain something deep to you. Like we just said about the circle. Okay? I can't grasp infinity. right? There's no way I can tell you from now till the end of time, think about infinity, but you won't be able to. But if I tell you something just as simple as, just imagine that you keep circling the circle, okay? Suddenly you have some notion of what it means to have infinity inside your mind. Because you can imagine, you just go on forever and ever and ever. How many revolutions could you do around the circle? An infinite number. But then comes Chassidus, and Chassidus says, that's not enough either. You have to bring us the King himself.
To the King himself.
You have to bring me the King. So the Baal Shem Tov and Chassidus is Ritzonenu lirot et Malkeinu. We want to see our King. Not in the sense of a picture, in the sense I want to experience him directly. So that's why do we have to say this? Because at Mount Sinai they did experience him directly, but that was a long time ago. So I have to find a way.
Shouldn't it still be in our...
Ken, it is, some of it is, and you're building upon that, but when a Jew comes to want to know Hashem, he says, so give me something I can hold on to. I want to see something, I want to experience something direct. Not just a lot of philosophy, not just a lot of pictures. But so I tell you right away, you know this thing that you call life in you? That's the King. There's no less than that. Hashem is at least that. He's much more than that. But he's that. As also when you go into the King's house and meet him himself, you can't fully grasp him entirely. But that physical encounter, that physical experience of meeting him, that's as close as you can come to knowing the object itself. There's a famous story about the Alter Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek that he wanted to teach him this concept. So he asked him, sitting on his lap, he says, where's Zaidi? So he pointed at his torso. He says, no, this is Zaidi's, then he pointed at his beard, this is Zaidi's beard. For his eye, this is Zaidi's eye. So the Tzemach Tzedek was a smart kid. So he said, Zaidi, go out. Hold on, maybe he went out by himself. And then when he left the room, I said, Zaidi, he called him. And he came in, and then he said, here's Zaidi. Because that's an encounter. This is already, because we're not talking about the eye or the ear or the beard. Here it is. It's true. I can't fully encounter the other. I can't fully grasp the infinite. But this is an encounter. This means that the King came to me. And it's a much deeper experience. So even when I say the life in me, that's Hashem, and I say the physical laws, that's Hashem, and I say that's all Hashem, 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 so on, I'm not grasping the full meaning of it. And if I grasp only that, it could become avodah zarah even. Mm-hmm. Okay, the person begins to worship that part of themselves that they think is godly. And yet, it's as close as you can. You can't forego this when the demand is in the people to see the King. Meaning that the need now is, it's not sufficient for us to just live in this distance. That the King is away in his palace and we're here and everything's fine. So really, this is a primer to understanding Hashem as giving the Torah in our generations. It's saying that in order for you to begin to relate to Hashem, you have to relate to something. You can't immediately relate to Him as the giver of the Torah. And everybody who does tshuva in one way or another, suddenly connected to Yiddishkeit, to Hashem, through an experience. Not because somebody showed them proof. And if they did, that was only as an opener to something that deeper that has to happen. That you have to have some experience of Hashem in order to want to serve Him.
To let the Lubavitchers who wanted to see a king so badly, they made him the Mashiach.
No,
closer.
That's another topic. Not exactly the same thing. So it needs discussion.
It's not idol worship, obviously.
Okay, it's a complex topic. Anyway, so we have here these 4 levels. Really, there are 4 levels. Again, they're Memaleh Kol Amin, Sovev Kol Amin, Kula Kamei Kelo Chashiv, and Leit Atal Panui Minei. And they're a Yud Kei Vav Kei, basically.
What was the 4th one?
Leit Atal Panui Minei. That there is no place void of him.
Right.
Okay? He fills everything. Which is, it sounds a little like Memaleh Kol Amin, but it's not the same thing. Okay. So what do we get from this? We need to begin to wrap it up, I think. What we get from this is that these are the meditations that clean up these blemishes of the ego. So how does it work? So we said, to understand how it works, you have to understand that the Yud Kei is easy, because that's Chochmah and Bina. So Leit Atal Panui Minei is what's going to fix the I'm here. And the I'm everything is going to be fixed by Kula Kamei Kelo Chashiv. Those are easy, right? The Chochmah heals the Chochmah and the Bina heals the Bina. What do you do with Amalek, who's I'm great? So for him you need the Vav Hei. One way of understanding Vav Hei is like the masculine and feminine, and Dat, which we said is what Amalek is, he's a blemish of the Dat, he's called a Kel Acheris Taris. He's the foreign god who's sterile, who doesn't give life. So to heal Amalek, I need to meditate on both Memaleh Kol Amin and Sovev Kol Amin. He's like the masculine and feminine in Dat. There's another topic that we began to touch upon yesterday in the Monday class. But it's important to know that Dat has a masculine side and a feminine side. So when the sages say Nashim Da'atan Kala, when they say that women's Dat is light, what they're trying to say is, in their language, and Kabbalah says it more exactly, is that women only have the Gvurot side of Dat. They only have the feminine side of Dat, and that makes them more light. Light means that it's more easy for them to attach to something. It's easier. Light means it's like light-footed, which means you're fast. So say somebody has light Dat, and only has the gvurot of it, means that he attaches very quickly. He gives life very quickly to what he connects to. Whereas men are heavy, have heavy Dat, which means it takes a long time for a connection to form, an attachment to form. It's very common in marriage that it's that way, that the woman begins to, there's a siman in Shulchan Aruch, Teva'u alei naseh, that she was asked to marry. The moment she's asked to marry, the Chazal say the whole body changes. There's an attachment right away. But with a man, who knows, 10 years maybe down the line, he begins to change, and he gets fatter. It takes a long, long time to attach. It's not an easy task. So it's a topic we'll maybe continue on Monday. Okay, so let's see how this works. We'll start from above to below because it's easiest. So if I'm here, my blemish is like Midian. You're in my face. I'm here. So how do you fix this? By meditating on what it means that Hashem is everywhere. He fills everything. How does that help you? So Hashem is here and I'm not. That's like the akol lo klum, like either 1 or 0, like a binary type of thinking. But that's not how it heals. It's not that I say that Hashem says, I'm here and therefore you're not, and that's how you heal somebody. That won't help. You have to learn from Hashem. How is Hashem's I? How is His ego? So His ego is leitatal panu. He's actually everywhere. Like Chazal say, Hu mekumo shel olam, ve'ena olam mekumo. So the way it's usually explained is that He's the space of the world, but He's not limited to the space. But here, you can say it mamish like this guy with the chair. Ze hakiseh shelo, aval en hakiseh shelo. It's like saying, Hu mekumo shel olam, He's the chair itself, but the chair is not His. So what does He do? He He is the space, and the first thing He wants you to do is to occupy His space. That's Tzimtzum, Mamash Kacha. That he's everything, but I don't see Him at all. Like He gives me full reign, do whatever you want. That's the real tikkun. That's what you need to meditate on. That's what Hashem does for you. Anytime you get angry at somebody who's parking in your space, okay, because he took up your space, so you can think that I'm also taking up Hashem's space. But He's happy with it. Yeah? So finally somebody came.
Daddy would probably shake his hand.
But it's even more than that. What do I mean by sit in His chair? What does it mean to sit in His chair? It says the third to last mitzvah is ve'alachta bidrachav. That you have to. Chazal say from this, mahu v'chum afatah v'chum, mahu gomel chasadim, afatah gomel chasadim. That everything that Hashem does, you should mimic. For what purpose? So it says very clearly in Chazal, in Chassidus, everywhere. It says Hashem is more than happy for you to take His place. What do you mean to take His place? It says like Avraham, in his lifetime, the midah of chesed, Hashem's midah of chesed didn't have to act. Why? Because Avraham did it all. He's more than happy for you to sit in His chair. You want to be like we said, Yitalech lefanei ve'etamim. Walk before me and be whole. He's very happy to let you do it the way you want to do it. In fact, He's waiting for when is somebody finally going to take my place. Not because there's existence without Him, but because that's what it means for Him to be the space of the world and not to hold it to be His. Because I created it for somebody else to come into it. That was my whole purpose, He says. So He very much wants somebody to be like Him. And not only that, to ensure that you don't feel awkward that you're sitting in His space, He hides Himself. You're never infringing on Him. Okay? You're never imposing on Him. He's very happy to have it. It's the opposite of Midian. But here you have to understand, He is the space of the world, and yet He holds none of it to be His. Completely gives it up. And so again, what's the idea here? That you have to cure it by saying that you're right. It's not that the ego is completely wrong. There is an I, meaning you're mimicking Hashem in a certain sense by saying, I'm here. Because Hashem really is here. Where is Hashem? Hashem is here. Hashem is there. Hashem is everywhere. And yet, even though He's everywhere, what you missed is the second part of it, which is that I don't have any problem with anybody occupying my space. There's a story that somebody once told about Rav Ginsburg, that he went to see Rav Yaakov Yosef before one of their meetings before he passed away. Yaakov Yosef, it was one of Rav Avadia's children. It was a big Talmud Chacham. So in their meeting, there were a lot of people, many more than they thought that would be there. And it turned out that in his office there weren't enough chairs. And nobody noticed, one of the people that was at the meeting noticed when they got up after an hour and a half that Rav Ginsburg didn't have a chair. So he was sitting, he said he was sitting like a little bit on one side of somebody's chair and a little bit on another. And he never said a word. And they were also, and when he saw this, he asked him, Rav, how did, you must have been very uncomfortable. He says, no, it's great, this is exactly what I needed. But not to even say anything, that's this midah. Said, I don't need space. What do I need space for? I have all the space I want. What does it mean? It means that he wasn't uncomfortable. How can you be not uncomfortable? The Alter Rebbe says that there's a mitzvah of putting a talus on when you daven. So you can say the bracha for somebody else. In fact, you can say the bracha for up to 10 people. So somebody asked him, how can you say a bracha for 10 other people? How can you put the talis over 10 people and say the bracha. That doesn't make any sense. So he says it depends. If 10 people, each one wants the talis, there's not enough talis to go around. But if each one wants to make sure that somebody else is under, so there's enough talis for everybody. That's the feeling of that I don't need to take up space. I don't need. Whatever I have, there's enough. It's a tikkun. It's not like you make do with less. It's not making do with less. It's that I don't need it to begin with. The same way that Hashem doesn't need it. He doesn't need it for his own needs.
It's for you.
It's for you. I made space for you. Okay, so that's the tikkun of this part of the ego. Again, so somebody with agoraphobia, this would be the meditation. That who is really here? It's Hashem. And look at how much space He made for all these people. He also made space for you. What do you think, that you're any different than anybody else? You have to meditate. You have to feel that Hashem fills the world. He's the space of the world. He's everything. And He made space for this person and that person. And He also made space for you. That's also the way to get out of claustrophobia, by the way, the same thing. That if you meditate, if you see the backdrop to the small space that you're in, I don't know, I have claustrophobia, so I've tried this. It doesn't work when I get into a cave. That I haven't been able to do. But if I'm with a lot of people together in the same place, it works.
Could you finish? I have claustrophobia. I don't take elevators. I have a hard time on planes.
Okay.
So if
It's the same, but in elevators, I think that there's two different things, but I'm not sure. I haven't been able to.
Break loose and fall down.
No, so with a cave, my fear is of suffocation much more than of, or not just suffocation, but of a collapse, which I guess in an elevator could be. But the moment that there's a little bit of space, I find it easy to do this meditation. To think about this. When there's no space at all, when I'm being crunched like this, then I can't breathe. Okay. I haven't been able to do it there. I've tried a few times. What?
What meditation are you talking about?
Listen, I think the moment that I have a little bit of space, it's easy for me to imagine. I guess because I'm thinking like a little bit like Descartes, like Cartesian space. Like I see space. And here's this, and here's this, and here's this, and Hashem, and suddenly there's a lot of room, because outside there's a lot of space. It feels different.
It reminds me of the Rebbe's Fabringens. I mean, that's what it really was. People were squashed on the floor, squashed on the benches, squashed on the backs of the benches, holding on to the ceiling, and that was, you had to make peace with this.
Yes.
So you have to make peace is one thing. Make peace is one thing, and feel relaxed, and you're at the beach. That's a different feeling.
No, you're concentrating on what's going on, actually.
Okay, so here, what's the example? The example is in Beis HaMikdash, that omdim tzfufim, mishtachavim revachim. It's not just that when you bow down, that you find, like what you just said about people didn't touch the floor. Effie likes to tell the story that in Yamim Noraim in 770, you can jump up on Simchas Torah. It takes you 5 minutes to come down until your feet touch the ground again. So, but the feeling is somehow that there's space.
But what you're saying is very rational. Like I can already feel it just talking about it. Like I become very irrational. Like I get physiological. Right. That's exactly what it is. No air to breathe. That's exactly what it is.
No, because you can't start at that moment. In my opinion, you have to build up to it, and you have to. Again, this is a meditation, and the truth is, really, you have to go from below to above. You have to begin with Hashem being the life in me. Then He's what's keeping the life in me. Then He's what's filling everything. And you can go in two different directions from that place of He's keeping everything inside, the sustaining part, the sovev kol almin. Because you can go in one direction would be the bina, and then everything before Him is not, and the other direction is saying, and He's filling everything. So you have to build up to that, and then and feel that or experience it as much as you can at it's not the rational level, It's an experiential level. You could say it's imagination, but that's exactly what you need your imagination for.
Right, connected.
Okay? And you have to work on it. And same thing with agoraphobia. Same thing, you have to understand that Hashem is giving everybody space here. It's not that they took up space and there's no space left for you. They took up space that's Hashem's also. And it works just as much for you as it works for them.
And that can become reality.
And that can become your reality. Right? But again, it's saying that you're right. Again, here we're talking about really blemishes of the ego that cause like some kind of phobia. But it could just be that, that my son can't stand the fact that anybody goes into his room. So whose space is this? Who gave you the space? Who is right now at this moment nullifying himself to give you this space? Usually what do parents say? It's all my house, right? What do you say? It's all mine. So I'm telling you that that's a level up. It's a level up, but it's not yet the final product.
Because at a certain level, they're God, and they can
Right.
absorb what God
Because they have to understand it, especially when they're younger.
You didn't understand
They have to understand Hashem as He manifests, or she manifests as the mother and father. You can't understand. I'll take it back. Until age 5, you can talk very theoretically, without anything concrete. From age 5 until age 12, 13, you got to be more concrete. You got to be something that they can hold on to, and so it becomes the mother and father. Okay, let's go on, and now we have to finish. Okay, we said then that we have ani hakol, that I'm everything. So that's the bina. Kula kamei kula chashiv. That really, who is everything? It's all Hashem. Kula kamei kula chashiv. Before Him, everything is not. How is this with Hashem? So again, if I would say you're nothing, so I'm killing the ego and not letting it survive, it'll immediately retaliate. Instead, you have to see how Hashem does it. How does Hashem do it? He says, it's true that kula kamei kula, it's true that from my point of view, everything here is nothing. But I'm just as happy with the reverse point of view, which is that I'm nothing. What human beings perceive is that this is something, this is everything, or I'm everything, and Hashem is nothing. And Hashem doesn't go against that. Haraya, the proof is that that's how many people feel. That I'm the something, and Hashem is a possibility. So you can do the same thing with other people as well. And if you feel that you're everything, if you feel that you're everything, so look at Hashem. He really is everything. And yet He's perfectly happy with the opposite feeling, that He's nothing and we're everything.
He said He's happy with it.
He allows it. He allows it. He doesn't destroy it just because it's not. Because, right, what does Paro say? If anybody else here is something, off with his head.
I understand the other side of it, but why? Because He allows it, is He happy with it?
Because He's allowing it. He's not.
There are other things that happen. She says Hashem cries with you, or
He said it. He's saying you'll grow up. Hopefully, God willing, you'll grow up. He prays for you, but He's not going to. But He's not going to obliterate. He's not going to obliterate your existence because of it.
That's being happy. It won't.
I meant like he approves of it. He allows it to exist. So it's not. I don't want to tell you no, you don't exist at all. That's not true. You exist. It's very important. But everything else also exists. And the fact that somebody else sees you as nothing is perfectly fine. So.
It's too heavy for me here.
Okay. Finally, let's go to Amalek. Amalek says, I'm great. I'm better than you. I'm greater than you.
And what does Hashem say?
It's true.
Hashem says, be great.
Wow.
He says, yes, you should be great. What does it mean to be great? So, again, let's say you're talking about being faster, being smarter. So what does Hashem say? So, no, I want everybody to be dumb. Right? Because if they become smart, maybe they'll be smarter than me. So we had a story like that in the beginning of the Torah.
The snake.
A little bit later. Migdal Bavel. What are they saying? That we can make war on Hashem and we'll win against him. We'll control the world and not him. So it's very interesting. What does he do? I never thought of it this way, but this is what comes out. Vayered Hashem lirot et ha'ir v'et hamigdal. He goes down. He says, you want to be greater? He said, I'll come down. You go up. Let's see what happens. And what happens? That eventually they can't get along. Because if Hashem is not above, the whole thing doesn't work for some reason. We don't know yet why. But we can begin to understand why, because we said that, what does it mean that Hashem is above? He's surrounding, right? It's as if Hashem went down from Sovev Kol Almin to Amalek Kol Almin. He went down from keeping, sustaining things in perpetuity, right? What's one of the most important things that we have that allows us to live as in society? That when I say a word, right, you don't look at me and say, wait a minute, the meaning was changed 2 minutes ago.
Trust.
No, we have a common form of language.
Yeah.
No, we understand each other. Why do we understand? Because language persists. Okay? If Hashem comes, it's the same thing about language. It's no different than life.
Different languages existed before that.
Good, maybe. So people who understood different languages talk to each other in different languages. But now imagine that each language, Sham balal sfatam, it says that he confused the languages. What does it mean? That a word that until now we said meant hammer, now it means throw a stone at me. This is called, in philosophy, they call this the myth of the museum. They call it, why myth of the museum? Because for every language, what we call safot iskemiot, leshonot iskemiot, meaning languages that were created by people agreeing upon what the meaning of words is. So there's a myth that it's like there's this museum that has objects or pictures of people doing things, and under each thing it says, this is called this, this is called this, this is called this. Now imagine somebody comes into the museum in the middle of the night, and he switches everything. So that would be like the sovev, meaning the guard over the museum, leaving, and people coming in and just confusing everything. So that's what happened. That's what it means, Vayered Hashem lirot et ha'ir v'et hamigdal. He came down from where? From being Sovev Kol Almin, he came down to only being Memaleh Kol Almin. You want to take over, you want to sustain the world? That's exactly what they said. They said Hashem is not a good sustainer. Every 1656 years, the sky falls down. So we'll hold it up. He says, fine, you hold it up. I'll come down, you go up. Let's see what happens. He says, you can't sustain it. You don't know how to hold life inside. If I'm not holding it, you can't hold it. You don't know how to hold language constant. You don't know how to hold anything. Not only that, probably the laws of physics would change also. Everything you couldn't trust anything. I guess that's what you meant by trust. Mm-hmm. But that there's persistence.
Was it everything? Was it more than the language?
No, so it says there was just the languages. Imagine they would have done that to the laws of physics.
It does.
They lost Hashem as Sovev. It says that's the difference between Amalek and the Jewish people. It says that Amalek, when he does things, it's called azut metzach. It's the boldness of his forehead. He's an az metzach legehenom. And he says, basically, I'll take over from here. He knows Hashem. not only does he know Hashem, he knows exactly what he does. What does rebelling mean? Like mutiny on the bounty. So what do? You get rid of the captain, you throw him overboard. I'm the captain now. I'll be the sustainer. That's what Amalek does. That's what he wants to do. So who is Amalek today, said the Rav. He said there are people in science and technology that's what's driving them. We can't count on God. We have to take control of it all. He says that's Amalek. Why? Because you're doing it because, first of all, you don't trust in Hashem. There's all this fear ridiculous fear already. Like the worst one is the guys that there's this near Earth collision something project in NASA, right? All these satellites out there looking for, God forbid, some asteroid that's bigger than a mile wide that's going to hit the Earth and cause us all to go into wherever.
So why they're doing to stop it?
Okay, so they'll stop it. They don't know how to stop it. They have no idea how to stop it. But what are they really doing? They're aggrandizing themselves. Because this is a good way to get money for putting up my science project up in the sky. So who needs it? What? You don't know what to do anyway. So why are you doing it? Because I'll take care of things. That whole feeling, that's Amalek. Amalek is mutiny on the back. It's a mutiny against the captain. It's not that he knows the captain very well. He knows exactly what he says. I can do it better.
Wait, so you said Hashem says be great. So what is
So Hashem says, no, be great. You're right. You have to be, not only be bold. Be like what we learned about faith and confidence. I want you to go ahead of me.
Right.
But go ahead of me.
You're taking over.
But you're not taking over. You're leading me in the direction that you want. And I agree, but you're doing it with love. You're doing it because I gave you the job. You're not mutinous. On the contrary, this is the highest form of serving me. So if you're serving me, it's a completely different story. So that's called Reshit Goyim Amalek, and Am Yisrael is called the Reshit of Hashem also. It's two Reshit. What's a Reshit? Reshit is the head. Who's at the head? Who's at the head? The same thing was with Yeravam and David HaMelech. That when Yeravam, who was the first king of Israel, of the northern kingdom, he passed away, so they offered him to come into Gan Eden, even though all the terrible things he did. Okay? So Hashem told him, do tshuva, even now, do tshuva, and you, me, and the son of Yishai, meaning David HaMelech, will walk together in Gan Eden. So he says, who's in front? Who's leading the way? He says, Ben David, not you. Why? Because you did it to aggrandize yourself. Somebody would say, but David, he's the most full of faith and confidence, he's the most bold, he's this. Okay, but he all did it because he wanted to aggrandize Hashem. It's all in Hashem's name. That Amalek can't stand. Meaning, it's not, how great can you be? As great as Hashem. In fact, Hashem wants me to be, as it were, greater than anything that he's done. He wants me to do more, but it's all in his name. It's all for his name, it's not for me. That's confidence, that's real faith. And the false one is azut panim legehenum, the same thing that Amalek has, but it's I'm greater, and it's only to show that it's just competitiveness. You have to know the other side. You have to know what they're good at, what they're not good at. So he learns all of Torah. He knows it better than maybe even I know it. Why? To show that he's better than Hashem, that he can do it better. So for instance, there's a mitzvah like this, he adds something more. Why? Because I can do it better. I can't stand that it's this way. When Rebbe added or went against something, he wanted to have the oral Torah written down. So what did he say? Et la'asot la'Hashem heferu toratecha. That I'm doing it for Hashem, and not doing it for me. I don't need it. And he even says that when Onkelos translated the Torah into Aramaic. So it says, Nizdaza Eretz Yisrael takama al takama. 400 parsa al 400 parsa. The land of Israel shook. There was an earthquake. And Onkelos understood it was because of him. So he said, ידוע שלא עשיתי לא לכבודי ולא לכבוד בית אבא. I didn't do this for my honor, for the honor of my family. I did it for your honor. And the earthquake settled down. That's the Amalek and Me is the one that says I can do it better than Hashem. Okay.
He was that great.
But it's competitiveness. What?
He was that great that it was questionable.
Okay. To understand, again, you're right. It's like a second Torah. It's like another giving of the Torah because it's in another language. When you ask, has anybody been able to translate the Torah perfectly? Unklus. Okay, you translate it perfectly. It's exactly what it needs to be. It's almost like giving the Torah in another language. But I didn't do it. What are we saying here? That if a person's competitive, you have to explain to him. In the end, you're going to compete with God. Because you're going to run out of people to compete with. Eventually, you're going to have to. Really, at its core, it's because you're in competition with Hashem. That's what you feel. It's like you have to take over. You have to control. This is, by the way, something that a lot of times Chavi notes that you heard from other people that it's not good to feel responsible. You didn't like this word responsibility? That I keep repeating as an important word. To take responsibility. Not to feel guilt, but to take responsibility.
No, Effie says don't use the word
responsibility. He says takes guilt. So
he says to be guilty.
So what the responsibility that they mean when they say that it's something negative is this responsibility. Is that I'm responsible instead of Hashem. That's a responsibility that's negative. And that it's like I can do it all. That's Amalek. That's the understanding what Amalek is. Okay, so these are the three klipas in terms of the ego. How do you fix this? So we said how each meditation, but to add one more thing about the last one, there's a kuntras called Ramachotiot, 248 passages that were handed down from the original mashpim of Tomchei Tmimim, and for a while they were only Baal Peh, and then eventually they were written down, and now they're published already. And one of them, in the 27th or 28th one, there's two different possibilities. It says that to be a chassid, you have to have three things. You have to be az panim, you have to have a bold forehead, and you have to know how to drink mashke.
What's mashke?
Alcohol. And you have to know chassidus. You have to learn chassidus. You can't not learn. It says if you can't do, and if somebody says you can be a chassid without one of these, so he's bold, saying bold. So he gives an example. He says, what's an example? That you have to be willing to go anywhere and to do anything because the Torah requires it, and because the Rebbe said so, and because that's what you need to do. You can't be, as it says, that's how the opening of the Shulchan Aruch is, at least in the tour. It says, L'olam yadam, Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema omer, that a person should be az kanamel, like bold as a leopard. In the Shulchan Aruch he didn't start with it, but he still says, the Ramah says in the Shulchan Aruch, Al yivosh mipnei amaligim, not to be afraid of those who scorn you. But to be az panim, it sounds the same thing as what we just said before, that Amalek is. But the whole difference is that I'm coming in the name of Hashem. I'm doing this because Hashem wants it, not because I want it. I don't need it. And it's saying that I'm the depth of why a lot of people felt I call it what's the word? That I what's the word? See, I lost it in two languages now. What does it sound like? It's like oppressed, but it's not oppressed. The fact that people felt again that the Chabad was in some way endangering them. And endanger is the wrong word, but maybe you'll find it as I talk. That they felt that it's threatened. Thank you. They felt threatened.
In which period of time?
All the time, even now. Because the statement is that to be a chassid, you have to be willing to be bold. It is threatening, right? Because the person's coming and saying, I'm going to change you. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. I'm not afraid of what you're going to say. So where does that come from? Because he says, I'm working for the Rebbe, I'm working for Hashem, not working for me. That's threatening. If somebody comes and says, I'm going to take your money because I need it, that we know how to deal with. You make a threat, I'll make a threat back. But when you come and you say, it's not for me, I don't care about I don't need it at all, it's for the Eibishter, so that's already threatening.
That's scary.
That's already, how can you speak in the name of the Eibishter? Well, what is this? What, somebody's actually living this crazy way that they don't care about anything except for what Hashem says? I don't believe that. So it's got to be all alive from the beginning to end. So somebody who comes out and openly says, I'm doing it for my sake, so I know how to deal with that. I live in the world for a long time. But somebody who comes and hides it and tells me that no, they're doing it only because the Rebbe said, or they're doing it only because, what are you talking about? This is all for you, and you're lying to me. You're using the Eibishter as some kind of facade to do what you want for yourself. So it's a very strong threat, because there's another side to this threat. Because if there's somebody who's really living this way, the person has to say, so why am I not living this way? And all the more so, what's scary is, what if they're successful? Maybe they'd be again, that's Amalek and Me. If I feel that way towards somebody that's coming in the name of Hashem, and I'm saying, they have to be unsuccessful, because if they are, then oy vavoy, I have to compete with them now.
That's the biggest threat.
That's a huge threat. I'm very comfortable where I am. I don't want to.
That's about being responsible.
Settle. That's the wrong type of responsibility. Okay. So that's the family. Finally, the whole idea is that in Purim, all this is who we win against, especially the competitiveness, and just feeling that somehow we're in competition.
That's why they drink so much alcohol.
And that's just prove that it says you have to do three things in Purim: drink a lot of alcohol, but then you also have to do something for Hashem, without any competition against somebody else, and you also have to learn Chassidus. These three things. The Seder. So thank you to let me say, there was also a question here. Hashem allows my ego to exist, but isn't there a consequence to help bring me closer? No, it's not so simple. Not all ego is negative. It means that there's also ego just in the simple sense that I feel that I exist. Not in the egotistical sense or egocentric sense. Just ego as the self. That's certainly something that Hashem wants you to experience, that you experience yourself as a self. He's not against that. If he was against that, he wouldn't allow that to be. And it's not that in the future that will all disappear.